and then I'll try and do 10 hours and, you know, and just kind of get them 10 hours in, because I think it's just like time.
Me, I'm good, bad down there, but Mark Williams is just sort of like...
In the twilight of most careers, a player begins to fade. The cue action slows, the reaction time dips, and the hunger that once drove every shot begins to fade into nostalgia. But Ronnie O'Sullivan isn't most players. When the snooker world thought he was nearing the end, he decided to rewrite what the end could look like. Between 2020 and 2023, Ronnie didn't just continue to play, he reminded everyone why he's the most naturally gifted player the sport has ever seen. This was the era where a veteran turned philosopher, where the so-called rocket became almost monk-like in his discipline, and yet, in moments, exploded with the same volcanic genius that had defined his youth. The story begins in 2020, a year where sport itself stopped. Snooker, played in silence and behind closed doors, had entered the COVID era. Many players struggled with the emptiness of the Crucible's atmosphere, the lack of crowd energy, and the loneliness of hotel quarantine. But for Ronnie, the isolation became a strange advantage. He'd often admitted he found snooker tournaments mentally exhausting, the pressure of fans, media, and expectation a constant drain.
That was one of my dreams, was to qualify for that.
Connection between him, the table, and the game itself. That summer, he walked into the World Championship unprepared by his own admission. He'd barely practiced, he wasn't in love with the game, and pundits had him outside the top tier of contenders. Yet when the ball started rolling, he looked free. There was no performance anxiety, no battle with the audience, no overthinking. He just played instinctively, quickly, ruthlessly. He beat Tepchaya Unu in just over 100 minutes, the fastest best of 19 match in Crucible history. He overpowered Ding Junhui, dismantled Mark Williams, and survived a brutal semi-final against Mark Selby that went down to a deciding frame. Then, in the final, he faced Kyron Wilson, a man from a new generation who had idolized Ronnie growing up. For a brief moment, it looked like the apprentice might challenge the master. But Ronnie stepped up another gear. He demolished Wilson 18-8 to claim his 6th World Championship, equaling Steve Davis and Ray Reardon, and placing himself just one behind Stephen Hendry's record. He'd done it at age 44, in a year where even he didn't think he'd win. His post-match words summed it up perfectly. I've just been playing.
It will be a shootout, which will be a one-frame knockout, which always is exciting. Everyone loves little...
half a cue action all year. Maybe that's the secret. But the win reignited something inside him. He'd spent years downplaying achievements, calling snooker just a hobby. But that 6th title proved his talent was still unmatched. And yet, Ronnie's 2020 victory wasn't just about greatness, it was about control. Gone was the unpredictable showman of the 2000s. In his place was a craftsman, a man who'd finally learned how to live with himself on and off the table. The following season, however, reminded everyone that even geniuses stumble. The 2020-21 campaign saw him lose 5 finals. Every time he seemed to close to another trophy, someone younger and hungrier beat him. Judd Trump, Neil Robertson, Mark Selby, the new elite. To outsiders, it looked like Ronnie's fire was dimming again. He laughed it off, saying he was just there to enjoy the game. But beneath the surface, something was building. He was evolving.
And I didn't like that feeling, you know, and I just thought that's not normal, you know, it's not right really to put, you know, to go through
again. This time into a player who could outthink as well as outplay anyone. By 2022, that evolution was complete. He arrived at the World Championship calmer, leaner, and sharper. He spoke like a man at peace, but his eyes still burnt with competitive fire. Every match felt like a masterclass in patience and precision. He opened against David Gilbert, then faced Mark Allen, Stephen Maguire, and John Higgins. A brutal route. Yet, he barely flinched. The cue action was smooth, the shot selection immaculate, and his control of safety play rivaled the best in history. This wasn't just speed and flair anymore. It was complete mastery. The semi-final against John Higgins, his old rival and equal in every sense, was vintage snooker. 2 veterans, each over 2 decades at the top, dueling like it was still the early 2000s. Ronnie won 17-11, and afterwards, Higgins said something few opponents ever do.
Got to mix a bit of right with left, because you were flowing, you were like, and I thought, I feel pedestrian here.
He's just the best ever. Simple as that. Then came the final against Judd Trump, the man many had dubbed his successor. The stage was set, the greatest of one generation versus the brightest of the next. Trump was in brilliant form, but Ronnie was transcendent. He led early, controlled every session, and when he made his century in the final frame to win 18-13, the entire Crucible seemed to pause. That moment, the embrace between Ronnie and Judd was pure emotion. It wasn't just a handshake, it was an acknowledgement. The torch wasn't being passed, it was being shared. Ronnie O'Sullivan had equaled Stephen Hendry's record of 7 world championships at age 46. becoming the oldest world champion in Crucible history. And in doing so, he'd shattered every narrative about age, decline, and consistency. When he sat down after lifting the trophy, he was visibly
I didn't have the confidence to just be myself, you know, and that's when I thought, oh, I'm banging trouble here.
emotional. Years of pressure, scrutiny, and self-doubt came out in tears. I just try to be as happy as I can, he said quietly. Snooker is just a part of my life now, not all of it. But that humility was misleading, because at that moment, he stood alone at the top of the sports mountain. 2022 wasn't just a comeback, it was vindication. Ronnie had spent a career fighting himself, perfectionism, mental health, motivation. But that year he conquered the only opponent that had ever truly challenged him, his own mind. His play was almost effortless, as if decades of struggle had distilled into pure, natural confidence. The rocket had found his perfect orbit. After that world championship, many expected him to slow down, to take his 7th crown as the final chapter, but Ronnie being Ronnie, he didn't. The 2022-23 season saw flashes of both frustration and brilliance. He began the campaign by winning the Hong Kong Masters in front of a record crowd of 9,000 people, the largest ever at a snooker event. The victory was a reminder that even in the era of Judd Trump and Luca Brecel, the biggest star in the sport was still the same man who'd turned professional 3 decades earlier.
Technically, I had so many faults, and I'd play players and think, he could be like 30.
Yet 2023 was also a test of endurance. At the Crucible that year, Ronnie's defense of his title started smoothly. He looked relaxed, even jovial. But as the rounds went on, cracks appeared. Against Luca Brecel in the quarterfinals, he led 10-6, seemingly cruising. Then, Brecel produced one of the greatest comebacks in Crucible history, winning 7 straight frames to stun the reigning champion 13-10. Ronnie smiled in defeat, congratulated him warmly, and walked away without bitterness. For the first time, it felt like he truly accepted that he didn't have to win to be content. Behind the scenes though, his hunger hadn't disappeared. He began working on his fitness again, talking about longevity, diet, mental calm. He'd become almost a philosopher of sport, discussing mindfulness, perspective, and the importance of joy.
Just enjoy the sport, love doing it. If I come 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th, I just enjoy the life.
It wasn't about chasing trophies anymore, it was about staying in love with the process. This balance between genius and peace is what defines the 2020-23 era of Ronnie O'Sullivan. In the 2000s, he was chaos, an unpredictable storm of brilliance and self-destruction. In the 2010s, he was the artist, sculpting his game into a disciplined, beautiful craft. But in the early 2020s, he became something even rarer, a man who had mastered both the game and himself. What makes this period so special isn't just the titles, it's the transformation. At 46, he won his 7th world title, a record that may never be broken, while speaking about his love for running, reading, and enjoying life. He became an ambassador for balance, a symbol that greatness doesn't have to burn you out. Ronnie's relationship with fans also evolved. Once seen as a volatile, unpredictable, and even arrogant man, he became more open, reflective, and funny. His post-match interviews were full of perspective, 1 minute joking about retiring to make sandwiches, the next offering genuine wisdom about self-acceptance.
I do believe a lot of players overplay and they probably don't realise it, and they just probably practice out of guilt, whereas
He began to represent more than snooker. He was now the embodiment of experience, someone who'd lived every extreme of success and failure and come out smiling. In the 2020-23 stretch, his cue ball control remained a marvel. Analysts often said his break building had reached its purest form. The speed was still there, but now it was measured. The aggression was still there, but now it was strategic. Watching Ronnie in that era felt like watching a jazz musician, improvising within total control, finding beauty in the precision. Every century seemed to come from nowhere, effortless, yet devastating. And beyond the numbers, the 1,200 plus career centuries, the 7 world titles, the endless records, the most impressive thing was how he stayed relevant. New talents emerged, but none carried the same mystique, the same electricity. When Ronnie played, everything else stopped. He made snooker feel alive in a way no one else could. By 2023, even his rivals were calling him the greatest ever.
Favorite movie?
Oh, Shawshank Redemption. There's probably a better.
Hendry himself admitted that Ronnie had surpassed him. The stats backed it up. More ranking titles, more centuries, more majors across a longer span. Yet Ronnie didn't seem interested in legacy. When journalists asked about the greatest of all time label, he shrugged it off. I just enjoy playing. Records don't matter, happiness does. But everyone watching knew, whether he admitted it or not, that he'd already cemented his place in history. His influence on the next generation is visible everywhere. Players like Judd Trump, Jack Lisowski and Luca Brecel all credit him for inspiring their attacking styles. Even Mark Selby, known for tactical warfare, has said he learned discipline watching Ronnie mature. The Rocket had become both teacher and competitor, a paradox few sports ever see. The late career O'Sullivan also embraced mentoring in his own way, giving younger players advice, offering praise and speaking honestly about mental health. He'd been through the darkness himself, the rehab stints, the burnouts, the media storms. Now he was using that experience to help others.
So it was a tough opener. I know it's 5-0, but could have been a lot closer, you know, you could have...
It's why fans connected with him more deeply than ever. He wasn't just the most talented player in the world, he was human, flawed, funny, and free. In those years, his runs between tournaments were almost as famous as his matches. He'd been seen jogging through Sheffield Parks before his sessions, headphones in, lost in thought. That was Ronnie's reset button, a way to escape the noise. He often said running kept him sane, that it gave him clarity. It's almost poetic. The fastest player in snooker finding peace through the slow rhythm of running. By the end of 2023, the numbers told one story. 7 world titles, 39 ranking wins, over 1,200 centuries. But the emotion told another. Ronnie O'Sullivan had achieved what few athletes ever do.
Quiet, I go into somewhere and I'm like, I'll sit in the corner, I'm like, don't want to be seen when he walks in. It's like, yeah.
To dominate across 4 decades while evolving through every phase of life. The 2020 to 23 era wasn't about breaking new ground. It was about perfecting everything he'd already built. Watching him during this time felt like watching history replay itself. The same cue action from the 1990s, the same genius, but with the wisdom of age. His face lined with experience, but his eyes still sharp. The sport had changed, faster, younger, more global, but Ronnie still stood at its center, not through force, but through presence. As 2023 drew to a close, the question of retirement lingered again. Would he chase an 8th world title? Would he walk away on top? Ronnie, as always, kept everyone guessing. I'll know when it's time, he said. Right now, I'm just enjoying it. And maybe that's the lesson of this entire era. The greatness isn't about the trophies you collect, but the peace you find while chasing them. Between 2020 and 2023, Ronnie O'Sullivan reached something higher than records. He found balance. He proved that genius doesn't fade, it adapts. That even as the years pile up, passion can still drive performance. That when you stop fighting the game, it gives back. And that sometimes the most explosive rocket is the one that finally learned how to fly steady.